Hi, I'm Dr. Jill Crista, author of bestseller Break the Mold, 5 Tools to Conquer Mold and Take Back Your Health. I want to share with you the beginning of my book today by video because I think there are 16 mold facts that everybody should know. First, I want to tell you how I got into this. I'm a naturopathic doctor, which means that I've been trained to find and treat the cause. I had this small group of patients that just weren't responding to anything. We could not figure out what the cause was until one day one of those patients had black mold, discovered black mold in his house. Here's a picture. A little bit of plaster bubbling, and they said, oh, that'd been there for years. They drew a line around it, it didn't grow, and so they didn't think that it mattered because it wasn't moving. It was moving on the back side of the wall, just like this. And this became this. And then here's my own house. Now I have some personal experience with mold. This little seam on my kitchen ceiling became a flood, which became this, and this, and then this. Tell you how PTSD watching that again. And then that became a hole in my kitchen floor as well as my ceiling. Here's a view from the basement. And never fear, it all worked out in the end. And because I knew how to manage mold, my family and I have recovered. Okay, so here are the 16 facts everybody should know. Number 1, mold is a survivor. As one of the oldest living creatures on Earth, it has survival figured out. It has us figured out. I think mold is like the Navy SEAL of the plant world. It can lurk inside a building undetected, just like a Navy SEAL can do. It can survive on hidden moisture sources. It competes for territory by taking out its opponents, and it's tenacious. It hunkers down and it waits until the coast is clear and then just grows again. That's why remediation is so important to do with good remediation companies. So here's a question. Mold is a problem for old buildings, not newer ones. True or false? How many of you said true? How many of you said false? The answer? False. Mold can grow in any building within 48 hours of the water intrusion problem. No matter what the age of the building, how old the structure, how old the materials, even if it's a brand new stinking building, if there's water intrusion and it's not dried out within the first 48 hours, and I mean completely dried out, mold will grow. I have an example of that from my house. That's how you get from this to this. But don't worry, you remediate and it's all fine. Here's your takeaway from that. Mold is not only an old building problem. Number 2, mold has bad gas. So here's a graphic from my book, and it shows spores, which we're all kind of familiar with. Spores go down, irritate the trachea, and get coughed out. Spore fragments, which is what happens when mold gets broken down, those fragments can go deeper into our lung tissue, and they can lodge in there and stay in there and permanently irritate our lungs. Mold mycotoxins, which is the bad gas. These are like mold farts. They can go all the way through our lung tissue, right into our body, and then our bodies have to handle them like a toxin, like a poison. Here's a true or false question for everybody. You'd know if you had mold because it would stink. How many said true? How many false? Answer? False. Mycotoxins, which is the most poisonous part about mold illness, have no scent at all. And I know you've smelled mold and mildew before. That's from the other stuff. That's from the aldehydes, alcohols, VOCs, the other component parts, which are hard on bodies but not poisonous like mycotoxins. And those need to be exposed to the air. If everything's trapped behind building materials, you don't smell it. That was the case in our house. So there's your takeaway. Mycotoxins have no scent. Number 3, mold is a bully. It picks on everybody. But whether it affects you quickly or after a while or not, that depends on your genetic sensitivity, and mold tends to pick on the genetically weak. That's just what it does. It's a bully. So remember, everyone reacts to mold differently. I get that question a lot. Does mold affect everyone? Because my husband doesn't seem to be affected, but I'm really sick. Yes, absolutely. It's just a matter of genetic susceptibility, dose, and duration. So how long you've been in the structure, how much time you spend in the structure. There are militaries around the world that are using these mycotoxins, mold toxins, as biowarfare. So we know they affect everybody. We just aren't really sure who the canaries are. If you're what I call a mold canary, a canary in the coal mine, if you're one of those people that is genetically sensitive, you're getting sicker much quicker than everybody else. Number 4, mold invades your body. When you have been exposed to a water damaged building, inside your body starts to change. We all have bacteria and fungus and things growing in our sinuses. Normal, healthy people do. But once you've been exposed to a mold damaged building, there's a survival mechanism that gets turned on because there are all of those mold toxins in the environment. That turns on a signal on the sinuses, or the bacteria and fungus in your sinuses, that says, we're under threat. The survival mechanism gets turned on, and all of your own normal, healthy flora starts to pump out mycotoxins and bacterial endotoxins. They feel under threat, and they start to act weird. Water damage building exposure is the key to turn normal sinus fungus, sinus and gut, into bad guy biofilm. Number 5, mold causes toxic breath. So now you've got sinus fungus that is acting like it's under threat, which means it's pumping out mycotoxins. Every time that you exhale, you're breathing out the mycotoxins. Every time you inhale, you are soaking those into your lungs, into your body. So the takeaway is, even if you get out of that environment, you are still probably bringing the problem with you in your sinuses and in your gut. Mold doesn't go down without a fight. Dying mold is more poisonous than living mold while it's dying. That's another really important reason for using professionals for doing your remediation. As far as how to kill it in your body, in my book I go through all the steps on how to prepare your body and get ready for those mycotoxins to be dumped. And a lot of people get sicker as they're trying to get better. I have it broken out into steps so that you can follow that and not get sicker when you're trying to get better. The takeaway, dying mold becomes more toxic. 7, turns you into a wimp. Yep, it makes your immune system weak by the things around your genetics, which means epigenetics. So it changes your whole environment, your body environment, to make you more susceptible to infection. It also changes your genes. It will actually change you at the gene level to make you more susceptible to infection and cancer. Scary stuff. That's your takeaway. Mold makes you more susceptible to infections. If you're getting more colds than people around you ever since you moved into a water-damaged home, a new office, your place of worship, you went away for the summer and you stayed at a camp or a cottage and you haven't been well since. If you're getting sick a lot, that could be that mold really affected your immune system. Mold causes cravings. Mold loves carbohydrates. So guess what mold sick people crave? Carbohydrates, sweets. So we see people craving sweets, alcohol, things that are really high in sugar content. Mold can make you feel crazy, hazy, and lazy. If you're a genetic canary for mold sensitivity, you can feel crazy because you seem to be sick. No one can find out what's wrong with you, and no one else around you is necessarily feeling as bad as you are. It can make you feel hazy because 2 ways. Your vision gets a little weird. It's like your left and your right eye don't work together. Think about if you've had too much to drink and your eyes go a little, whoo. That's what mold toxin does to you all the time. People will go in and get their eyes checked, and then they'll go a couple months later and say, these glasses aren't working for me. And it's because their vision has actually changed. They can go in 2 months later. If they're still in the moldy environment, it'll change again. And it might get better, worse, better, worse. It's messed up. It also makes you feel hazy because it causes cognitive fuzz, brain fog. That's what it does. We call it mold brain. And then lazy. People who are mold sick have fatigue. One of the most common reasons for chronic fatigue syndrome is mold exposure. Mold causes allergies. So again, on that immune system thing where it makes you more susceptible and wimpy on the immune side, it also makes the immune system freak out to everything that it's exposed to. So you can see somebody, if they've just taken a new job in an office and the office building has water damage, and all of a sudden they start getting allergic to grass. And they never were allergic to grass, or they suddenly are allergic to their dog, and they never had a problem with their dog. If there's a new onset allergy, one of my first things that I do is I try to assess whether they've been exposed to a water damaged building. Causes food sensitivities. Same thing. Anything you eat frequently, the body will start to get confused because its immune system is getting tired out. If you eat something commonly, it'll start to react to it. Not because the food's the problem, but because the inside lining of the intestines is now so loaded with those toxins, it's starting to wear away and ulcerate the inside of that intestine, causing leaky gut, causing food sensitivities. Makes you sensitive to chemicals. Mold toxins are toxins. They load up your organs of detoxification, your liver and your kidneys. You go into like a big box store and it's starting to give you headache and brain fog. You can't remember why you were there. And it's ever since you moved into this new apartment in the basement and it had water damage at one time. You start to get the picture, right? You'll notice also people can't burn candles anymore. They can't driving their car for a long time without the windows open because the exhaust is starting to affect them. That could be from mold exposure. Makes you sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Mold will actually increase the amount of EMFs in an environment. And then in a high EMF environment, mold grows more readily. And makes more toxins. So it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. Suddenly you're getting like this weird ear buzzing after you've talked on your cell phone, which I'm hoping that everybody isn't putting their cell phones up to your head anymore. Or from holding your phone, you get like tingly fingers, or you can't be by your computer, or you can't exercise. Exercise creates good EMFs. It's like you were able to exercise pretty well, but you're starting to get really fatigued and not able to handle the exercise. That's increased EMF load, and that could be mold toxicity. Mold sickness is hard to identify, really hard, and really hard for us as doctors. So I created a questionnaire from all of the mold people that I saw and consulted with my colleagues. You're welcome to have this questionnaire. This is the coolest part of the questionnaire, is that it gives you a risk score so you can determine if you're high risk or low risk for mold toxicity and mold sickness. So if you would like a printable PDF copy of this, just email me at support@drcrista.com. Mold sickness is often misdiagnosed. Oh my goodness, is it ever? It's misidentified as all kinds of different conditions. Most of the conditions on the category 3 on the questionnaire give you some kind of hint to how often mold is called something else when really it was mold all along. Your big takeaway from today is that mold sickness is bigger than just the spore stuff. Centers for Disease Control, they list mold sickness as asthma, allergies, and hypersensitivity pneumonitis. That's spore illness, but there's this whole other set of illnesses from mold that have to do with the toxins. So think of mold illness as spore plus mycotoxin problems. And mold is part of a scandalous cover-up. You know, there are a lot of people who don't want mold to be the problem. I mean, I know as a homeowner, I didn't want mold to be the problem because it was going to, ding my insurance, cost me money, cause total upheaval in our home, made us lose some furniture. I mean, it's really easy to convince somebody to ignore mold being the problem because it's just so darn inconvenient. And there are a lot of landlords, companies, that kind of thing that don't want to fork out the cash. But let me tell you, indoor mold is never, ever okay. Don't let anyone convince you. Don't let someone point to something and say, oh, that's not the bad mold. Any mold indoors is not okay. All right, so those are 16 facts. There's lots of information in my book on how to get better from mold. I know because I've done it with patients and I've now done it on myself. And I know you guys can do this. Break the mold. You guys can conquer it. I know you can.